So it is 2 o'clock on the dot, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Paige Bredenkamp. I am the e-resources and school library consultant at the Wyoming State Library. Today's presentation features two librarians from here at the WSL, Vincent Crolla, our legislative specialist, and Marcie Blaylock, our federal documents librarian. And they are going to introduce and highlight the Wyoming Legislative Database and federal materials available in the state library's physical collection. And did you know that the Wyoming State Library is open to the public? Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, the doors are open and you can come in and browse and check out materials. Not every state library has that feature, but we do. And you're always welcome to come find out more and check us out. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the WSL YouTube channel. A link to the recording will also be sent to everybody who registered for this webinar. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, but feel free to type questions into your chat if you don't want to forget what you're going to ask. And now I'm going to turn this over to Vincent and Marcie to share about materials available, both physical and digital, at the Wyoming State Library.
Thank you and welcome everyone. As Paige said, my name is Vince Crolla. I am the legislative specialist here at the Wyoming State Library. I've been in this position for about 8 months now, and part of my job involves helping people access and use the Wyoming Legislative Database. So what is that? Well, it is one of 6 databases in the Wyoming State Library's digital collection suite. You might be familiar with the others: newspapers, places, state publications, inventors, and trademarks. If you haven't had a chance to check them out, you definitely should. There's a lot of great information on there. But as a broad overview, the Legislative Database is a collection of over 77,000 downloadable and mostly text searchable digital records related to lawmaking in Wyoming. It dates back to territorial days and runs to the present. It is also free and open to the public, so that makes it a great resource for anyone with an interest in Wyoming's legislative process. That includes lawmakers, legislative staff, educators, students, as well as anyone who might be curious about how our system works. So my plan for today is to first go over our homepage, then we'll jump into the database and I'll show you the basics of searching, sorting, browsing, and viewing. After that, we'll take a look at the different types of documents we have available in the database. And finally, we will discuss legislative histories, so what they are and how to construct them. So let's get started. Our website, I might be in the chat here. Our website is in the chat. It's wyominglegislation.wyo.gov. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And here we are at our website. So this is our homepage. I had several links I wanted to highlight with useful tips and information. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. The first one is right here in the center. It's about this website. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to open up some information about the database itself and the different types of documents we have available. Most of this I'm going to go over pretty much word for word. At the bottom of the page, we have a bunch of useful links for further research, like to the archives, to our state library website, to the law library. I'm going to go back. I'm going to actually turn on that. There we go. Back, and so about our website, to the right of that, we have news and updates. And this will give you some information about the new documents we have placed in the database. You can see here that a couple months ago, we added all the documents from the 2024 budget session. Back up again. Below that, we have a link called Search Help. Search Help will give you some information about browsing and searching in the database. I'm going to go over the basics. But as you scroll down here, you can see there are some advanced ways to search the database, and I definitely recommend checking those out. Back again, and finally, our contact information, contact us. We have the Wyoming State Library's contact information, along with our legislative team of me. My email address is vincent.crolla@wyo.gov, and my phone number is 307-777-5914. Okay, so let's jump right into the database. The way you get there is you click on this box here that says click here for search or browse Wyoming legislation. And this is the database. We'll start by looking at how to navigate it. There's a lot of different places where we could start, but we're gonna begin with text searching. So at the upper left-hand side here, we have a text search box. It says search or press enter for all records. So here we can type in our search terms. It's a lot like Google. The more specific your search terms, the fewer results, but hopefully they'll be more relevant. We can search using just a single word. So if I were to search Cheyenne, we see that the database tells us that we are looking at results 1 through 50 of 5,882. That's quite a few results we have. We can also use multiple words. If I were to write something like Cheyenne City, we can see that the database tells us we are looking again at 1 through 50, and we have 1,303 results. We can also get even more specific by using quotation marks. So if I were to write something like, quote, City of Cheyenne, that will keep City of Cheyenne all together, and it will look for results that have those words in that order. You can see that we have 1 through 50 of just 278 results now. So the database also gives us different options for viewing. So on the upper right-hand side, we can see that these four icons here. One that is clicked is called List. And List shows us the title of the document here, a thumbnail of the document here, and various information about the document. So things like the title and number and session number, that sort of thing. And it's kind of like an index card. So it shows all these together in one block. So we scroll down, we can see another block and another block. To the right of that, we have thumbnail view. Thumbnail view shows us the title and just a thumbnail of the document. To the right of that is map view. It's not something that we use in legislation. So we'll head back to list view, and then we'll go to the left of that, and we have grid view. Now, grid view is like a spreadsheet. We have our rows and columns here. So our rows and then our columns, and each column has a title, has a name there. With spreadsheets, you may need to change the width of the column in order to read the entire entry. And so the way you do that is you place your mouse between the two columns. And you'll see two lines and arrows going each way. Then you click the mouse and then just drag it. So now we can see more of the entry within that column. You might also notice that it says that we're looking at entries 1 through 50 of 278. If we scroll to the bottom here, I don't see any kind of page navigation. We have this ribbon that comes up at the bottom about accepting cookies. So you have to accept those in order to see the page navigation here at the bottom. And also we have options to change the number of results per page. So we can change it from 4 to 1,000. Head back up here to the top. So let's take a look at one of these documents. I'm going to click on the City of Cheyenne. and it opens up the document, load, and we have a view of the document right here in this central location. We can zoom in using this plus and zoom out using the minus. So if we click on zoom in, we can look at it larger version. And if we zoom out, it'll get smaller. We can work our way through the document, either using our mouse wheel to scroll down, or we have page up and page down buttons here, or we can use the scroll bar. We also have an option to search within the documents. If you click here, we have a search button. I said earlier that the documents are mostly text searchable. This is an example of one that is not because it is handwritten. There's also some damaged or blurry digitization, so those won't be text searchable. But if it was in print, we could search within the database or in the document. Along this right-hand side, we have our metadata. So that's the data about the document. Things like the title, session, some related documents that we'll go over here soon. Above metadata, we have options to save your research. So right here, we have share document. If we click on that, we have options to make a link to this document or link to just the digitized form of the document we're looking at. We can also download the document with download options here. We can download the document as a PDF. We can also download just the metadata, this information here. We can print the document, print the whole thing, or just a certain area of the document. And we can also email the document. So that is it for viewing. Back to our search results here. Sometimes it would be useful to sort the results. In a situation like this where I've searched for City of Cheyenne, maybe I want to look for the oldest documents available. And so I can take a look at my column titled year, and I can click on year, and we'll resort our search results to the earliest first. So now we have 1869 first. It might also be useful to sort our results by title in alphabetical order. So if I click that, then I get my 1991, then it starts with its A's and goes down to B's. All right, once you're done with a search, we have this X right here to restart everything. So another way to search around the database is using our browse option. So we're currently clicked on browse. We have browse by chamber, browse by decade, and browse by year. So we'll start with browse by chamber. This will show us documents that relate to the two chambers of the legislature. Like almost all states, except for Nebraska, we have an upper chamber and a lower chamber. Our upper chamber is called the Senate, and our lower chamber is called the House. And they work together to pass laws. If we click there, we can see that we have documents related to the joint House and Senate, which is the rules that they follow. We'll go over those in just a minute. We also have options to just look at the state House, the state Senate, and the session laws they pass. Since this database goes back all the way to territorial days, we can also take a look at the territorial documents just by themselves. The Senate was called the Council back then, so we have the Territorial Council, the House, and the session laws. Go back. We can also browse by decade. So this will just show us each decade, and we can take a look at the documents within there. One I use most often is browse by year. When you hit browse by year, you'll see all of the years that we have documents available. The little bracket tells you how many documents we have in that year. This goes back to 1869 to the present. One thing to keep in mind is that when you scroll all the way to the bottom, it looks like maybe we stop at 2002. However, The page navigation is just at the top. So click on the 2, and now we get to 2024. So using the browse, we can take a look at documents we want to see. If I wanted to just look at documents from 1884, I can just click on 1884. And then I click on the decade. And then I want to look at the laws they passed. Well, I'll click on session laws. So here are all the session laws, all the laws that the legislature passed in 1884. In order to browse back, you can't use the back button. If you do that, everything kind of disappears. While you're browsing through, the database creates this kind of navigation path for you. So if you wanted to move backwards, we are looking at session logs right now. If you wanted to move backwards and see all the different types of documents, just hit the next button backwards. So 1880 to 1889 will show us all the documents from before. If we wanted to bills instead, we can look at those, or we can go back and see all the documents. If we want to go back again, 1884, then browse by year, and then we can look at a different year. So 1929. We'll click on the decade again, and then back to laws. So navigation is a little bit more complicated, no back button, but we do have this navigation path that the database makes for us. We'll go back and back and back. Okay, so that is the basics of searching and navigating and browsing, searching in the database. So next up, we're going to take a look at the 8 types of documents available. We're going to take a look at examples 2. All of my examples come from 1999. So I'm going to browse by year. I'm going to scroll down to 1999. And I'm going to click the decade button. And there we can see that there are 8 headings here with brackets for the number of documents we have for each one. So we're going to start with rules. I'm going to click rules here. So rules are 3 sets of procedures followed by the House, the Senate, and jointly. They cover issues like the order of business, committees, which are groups that consider proposed law and make recommendations, how to handle legislation, and so on. We have from 1869 to the present. So we're going to take a quick look at one of these, the Wyoming House of Representatives rules from 1999. So here are the rules. You can see that rule number 1 is the hour of meeting. They meet at 10 o'clock, unless they have designated a different time. They have an entire order of business here, so roll call, prayer, journal, and so on and so forth, how they handle absent members and officers. And so there are other rules for the Senate and rules they use jointly. If you really want to understand what the legislature is doing, why they're doing things, I highly recommend reading the rules. The newest version from 2024 is about 80 pages for all 3. And you read that and you will really understand what's going on. So I highly recommend. Moving on, we're going to take a look at House bills and Senate files. Oops. So we have House bills here and Senate bills here, Senate files here. Both of these are proposals for new laws or changes to current ones. The name difference is just based on the chamber where they originate. Something useful about them is that they highlight the changes to laws within the text. The current rules state that changed and additional language is shown with underlines, while deleted language is shown with strike-throughs. Previous years, though, might use asterisks or capitals or italics, just according to the rules at the time. So we have House bills going back to about 1871 to 2000. 2001 to the present, you can find on the legislature's website, which is wyoleg.gov. So we're going to take a look at an example here. Senate bill number 11. So this is Senate file number 11. It just has to do with changing the date that the legislature will convene for the budget session. It's kind of a simple law. But we can see while we scroll down here, we get a lot of information about how a file or a bill becomes a law. We can see here that it gets introduced, it gets read and assigned to a committee. The committee gives a recommendation. It then goes to the committee of the whole, which is just the entire body sitting as a committee with less formal rules. Then it's read a second time and recommended to pass or not, and then it gets a vote. You can see here that this vote passed the Senate 30-0. There's a lot of great information in this about the whole process and how it works. And this process is all set out in the rules. So definitely go back and read those. You can see then it gets sent to the House. And the whole process starts all over again. The House receives it, it gets referred to committee, and then they make a recommendation, and then it's referred to committee as a whole, and they recommend, and then they vote on it too. And you can see after the third reading, they passed it 55-2 with 2 excused and 1 absent. This Senate file also gives us a lot of information about how the votes actually happened. So this is the, let's see here, the House vote. You can see all the ayes and some nays and some excused. And it comes out to 55-2, like we said. Then we have the Senate votes. We have all 30 saying yes. We also have the voting from the committees. So this is the Senate committee. Number 12, that I said before, is rules and procedures. Which makes sense since they're trying to change when they're convening. We move on down and we have the House version of Committee 12 and their vote too. And at the end of this, we get to the actual language of the Senate file. So we can see that it has the language of saying the summary of what they're trying to do with the bill. And if we scroll down some more, as I said before, in bills and files, they indicate what they're trying to change with a strike through or an underline. So we can see that with this file, they're changing from the 3rd Monday of February to the 2nd Monday of February. Let's see here. So this is an example of a Senate file that actually passed. We have also in the collection bills and files that didn't pass. They failed for some reason or another. They either failed by vote, or they were withdrawn, or they got vetoed by the governor. An example of that is this one, Senate File 14. This is a file where they were trying to change administrative fees for copies. So not that ground shaking, but we go through the same process again. It gets introduced and to committee. They recommend that it does pass. And then it gets to the committee as a whole and it fails the vote. And the bill dies then. So that's the end of that. So those are bills and files. Next, we're going to talk about enrolled acts. So here we have enrolled acts in our database. We can see all of these here. So an enrolled act is the final copy of a bill or a file as it was passed by the House and the Senate, incorporating all amendments adopted by both chambers. So we have from 1869 to about 2014, and then 2001 to the present is available on the legislature's website, wyoleg.gov. So we're going to take a look at Senate Enrolled Act 70. We're going to scroll by this letter real quick, but we'll come back to it. So this was a law to change the date of the political party convention to make it earlier. So we can see in this language here, they change it. So instead of in April, they're going to meet in March instead. We scroll down some more and it says that this act is effective January 1st, 2000, only if the Secretary of State certifies on or before that date that Wyoming has agreed to participate in a joint Rocky Mountain presidential preference primary. So this is from 1999. This law was kind of a reaction against the 1996 presidential primary, where Bob Dole secured the Republican primary before many Western states got a chance to vote. So many Western states got together and decided maybe we should make our presidential primary earlier, and then we can actually have a say. So we'll scroll back up here. The governor, also back up, on these enrolled acts, you can see that we have the speakers of the House's signature, the president of the Senate's signature, and also the governor's signature. So this became law. The governor at the time was Jim Geringer, and he noticed something about this law and decided to write a letter about it. So some of these enrolled acts have some interesting information in addition. So we have things like they might talk about why they vetoed or why they signed something, why the governor signed something. So the governor realized that the law didn't state who makes the decision. And he wrote a letter to his Secretary of State, Joseph Meyer, saying that, for this, for the sake of clarification, I will assume the responsibility as governor and make the decision. And then explains how the Secretary of State should act in accordance with that. So we get this extra information in sort of a public letter format. So the legislature could respond to that if they wanted to, but this gives us some more background information about what was happening. Okay. Next up, we have bill actions. Bill actions are timelines for each bill and Senate file, tracing their progression through the legislature. These actions can include introduction, committee assignments, readings, votes, amendments, withdrawal, and passage. So we'll take a look at one real quick here. Bill action for House Bill number 1. House Bill number 1 is the government appropriations bill. So this is government funding. So as we scroll through here, we can see a whole lot of underlined language, so additional language of amendments that are being put forth by representatives. So we can see that this amendment was adopted. And as we go down, we have more amendments and more amendments and more amendments. So we have from about 1957 to 2000 on bill actions. Next up is chamber audio. So we have daily audio recordings of the events and actions taken on the House and Senate floors. For the House, we have about from 1996 to 2020. From the Senate, we have about 1997 to 2020. There are more recent and video versions available at the legislature's website. So we can click on one of these. We're not going to listen to one, but they're all dated. Unfortunately, they're not transcribed or tagged, so it does take a little bit of listening to get some information out of these. Next up, we have session laws. And session laws are laws that were passed during a particular legislative session. They contain the final wording of the laws and are assigned chapter numbers chronologically. Starting with 1992, the language changes are indicated within the text, like with bills and files. We're going to take a look at one of these just real quick. Chapter 3 we can see that Chapter 3 was Highway Patrol name change. That's the title there. We can see the original bill. It was originally House Bill number 111. As we scroll down here, we can see the changes that this law made. It changed the title of patrolman for the Highway Patrol to trooper. And it changed in a number of laws. We can see 11-24-108, 18-6-306. Highway patrolman changed to trooper. Session laws that are intended to become permanent will go into the statute books, while frequently changing laws like appropriations bills, funding, will not. You won't see a funding bill in the statute books. And finally, we'll talk about journals. So journals are daily records of the events in the legislature and actions taken by senators and representatives. We're going to take a look at the Journal of the House of Representatives here for 1999. You can see Journal of the House of the 55th Legislature of Wyoming. Here are the dates of the legislative session. And as we scroll down here, I'm just going to scroll quickly. We have some memorials, who was the Speaker of the House and the various officers. One of the more interesting things about this is if we scroll down to page 20 here, the journals contain the transcribed remarks from various people. This one is the State of the State address from Governor Jim Geringer at the time. It's a full transcribed speech that he made. Very interesting to look at. Okay, so those are the 8 different types of documents available. We talked about browsing and searching through the database. So now we're going to put it all together and we're going to talk about creating a legislative history. So first off, what are they? So the U.S. Department of Interior has a definition that I like. They said, quote, legislative history research refers to the efforts to track the progress of a bill through the legislative process and to the examination of documents created through that process. So they're a way to help determine legislative intent when the language is unclear by going to the source and compiling documents like session laws and bills and journals. We can also use them to research changes to a law over time. So I picked out a law for us to take a look at because it's something that a lot of us have come into contact with. The law that we're going to use is Wyoming Statute 1-11-102. If you've ever served on a jury, you've come into contact with this law. It says, convicted felon disqualified. If a person who has been convicted of any felony is disqualified to act as a juror, unless his conviction is reversed or annulled, he receives a pardon or his rights are restored pursuant to Wyoming Statute 7-13-105. So I pulled this statute from the Wyoming Statutes Annotated. That's where you're going to want to go for this kind of research. Most libraries have a set of the statute books. They're green. I think there's 14 volumes, something like that. I pulled this one from the internet. There is a link, the Wyoming Legislature's website, or you can just search Wyoming Statutes Annotated in Google, and I think the first 3 or 4 results will get you there. So, so if you've ever been called for jury duty, they ask you this question, and that's because of this law. Luckily, some of the work has been done for us, so we want to go take a look at the history of this law. We can see right here in the statutes annotated, we have a whole history section. We can see that it's kind of a dense jumble of letters and numbers, but luckily we only need one type of entry from it. And those are the ones that talk about session laws. We can tell session laws because they have chapter numbers. And so these are all references that are separated by semicolons. And we can see here that we have a chapter 23, All the way over here, we have Chapter 188. So these are session laws that we need. Usually when I do legislative history, I just copy the whole thing and I paste it into a Word document. And instead of this kind of horizontal way of looking at it, I look at it vertically like this. And then I highlighted the documents that we're actually going to need to look at. So the first one we can see is Laws 1899, Chapter 23, Section 2. So that is the original law that the original session law where that statute was created. We go find that by browsing. We know that 1899, we can go start over here. We can browse by year. We can scroll to 1899. We hit the decade and then session laws. And then we go to Chapter 23. And here's the document that we need to look at. This is the original document that for that law. We can scroll down a little bit. We saw that it was Section 2, persons disqualified as jurors. Section 2, a person is not competent to act as juror who has been convicted of malfeasance in office or any felony or other high crime. It's a little different than what we were looking at before, the law as it is today. To save us a little time, I went ahead and just pulled all of the documents. So here's the one we were just looking at, and I highlighted the section we were talking about. We can see here that it was originally House Bill 97. I went and pulled House Bill 97. We can see it here. Well, we can sort of see it here. It's kind of a dark scan here, but we can scroll down a little bit and we can see the original bill. We can see here that we have sort of a handwritten amendment, some like whiteout here, amending it again. And here's our section, unchanged. If you're curious about what these amendments were here, we can take a look at the journals. So I went ahead and pulled the journals. This is House Journal for the 5th State Legislature of Wyoming, 1899. So if we scroll down here, these are pretty lengthy. I think the journal altogether is something like 300-400 pages long. So I went ahead and just pulled the pages that we needed. We can see House Journal on the first day. It convened on January 10th. 200 pages later, we can see that House Bill number 97 was introduced and referred to committee. As we scroll down, we get a report from a committee. And we can see here that the committee as a whole changed one of the words from 70 and inserted the word 60 instead. So that was one of the changes that we saw in the bill. We scroll down some more and we see the second reading. They suspended the rules in order to pass this bill, and it ultimately passed. And so then it gets sent to the Senate, and it passes the Senate. And it says that the Senate had amended the bill. And we scroll down some more and we find out that the Senate actually didn't tell the House how they amended it. So we could move over to the Senate Journal and scroll through here to find out how the Senate amended the bill. We move along here in the House Journal again. We now find out that the House agreed with the Senate amendments. It gets passed by the House and the Senate, and so it moves to an enrolled act. It gets a new number, House Enrolled Act number 23. And then it gets sent to the governor for signature. And then we get a message from the governor stating that he signed Enrolled Act number 23. It became law. And here's a picture of DeForest Richards, the governor at the time. The next time that this is changed, next time our laws changed is 1977. And so it was 1977 Session Law, Chapter 188. I'm going to scroll down real quick and we can find out that it changed to say person is disqualified to act as a juror. A person is disqualified to act as a juror if he has been convicted of any felony. That's a bit more simple now. It's kind of gotten away from those sort of nebulous concepts of a high crime and then malfeasance in office. We could go through the original Senate file. This is a large revision of the law. It's about 200 pages. And this is the Senate file, which is about 1,200 pages. So we'll just keep moving along here. The next time it changed was in 1998 with Session Law Chapter 89, original House Bill 29. It changed to a person who has been convicted of any felony is disqualified to act as a juror unless his conviction is reversed, annulled, or receives a pardon. Almost the same as what we have today. Here's the House bill. And then the latest change was in 2003. We have the restoration of voting rights. So our bill kind of got caught up with a change in the restoration of voting rights. And so that was the final change here. Unless a person has been convicted of a felony, and then we have the addition of the A section for 7-13-105. So at the end result here, we can see that there's a narrowing trend for applicable laws and also legislative interest in restoring juror qualifications after a prior felony conviction. So that's about all I have for you today. My goal here was by the end of this that you all feel comfortable with the database and using the various documents the legislature creates. And there is a legislation coming up at least every year. So I encourage you to read the bills as they're posted, consider the proposed changes, you know how to recognize them, and to contact your legislatures with your thoughts. And with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and pass it over to Marcie Blaylock, who is the Federal Documents Librarian.
Awesome. Thank you, Vince. I know for me, even as a federal documents librarian, going through how to do a legislative history is always very helpful for me. So I hope you guys found that helpful as well. So as Vince had mentioned, I'm Marcie Blaylock, the federal documents librarian here at the Wyoming State Library. I've been here for a little over a year. And I do have prior experience working with federal materials and archival and library materials. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen here real quick. That in presentation mode there. Awesome. Okay, so we're just going to do a quick little walkthrough our federal documents here at the Wyoming State Library, kind of looking at the history of our collection of them, how to access our digital federal materials, and then a little about our physical materials here physically at the library as well. So just in general, we started becoming a federal depository library in 1871. So we've been a depository library for a long time now. And a little bit after that, we became a member of the Federal Document Library Program or Federal Depository Library Program, FDLP. And this program was initially established in the early 1800s to ensure that the American public had access and just easier access in general to government information in depository libraries throughout the US and also US territories. So this was established by Congress, and then we became a part of that. Currently, right now in Wyoming, there are 7 federal depository libraries. So we are one. as well as the Wyoming State Law Library, the University of Wyoming Library, the University of Wyoming Law Library, and then we have one at a public library, the Campbell County Public Library, and then two at various colleges in the state. So Western Wyoming Community College's Hay Library is a federal depository, as well as Northwest College's John Taggart Hinckley Library as well. So overall in the entire state, we have two that are under state entities, and then four that are university and college related entities, and then one at a public library. And so those are kind of scattered across the state, and will be housing your federal documents if you are looking for them. So just looking at how to access our federal materials on our online digital collection suite, it's going to be very similar to where we would find Vince's collection as well. So just looking on the left, that is our Wyoming State Library homepage that will pop up if you type in library.wyo.gov. And that is your starting place for anything related to the Wyoming State Library. Lots of resources there. But specifically what we will be looking at is over on the right, if you go to collections and pop that open, and then scroll down to WSL Digital Collection Suite. Let me get my little pointer out so we can see that. So right here, that second option there. You click on that, and that will lead you to, let's see, there we go. That will lead you to our digital collection suite. So everything that Vince had mentioned, so our newspapers, our Wyoming places, our legislative collection, trademarks, inventors, and also where federal documents live. So federal documents live under Wyoming publications. So on the left side of the screen, that right box there. After clicking on Visit Website, that will take you to our state publications website. So it can be confusing to some people that our federal materials are under state publications, but that is where they are located as of right now. So after clicking on that, the easiest way to get to federal publications is to search by agency at the top there on the left. And that will pull down a big selection of various agencies that are state agencies and various departments, but Wyoming federal publications will always be at the top there. So pretty easy to find. You don't have to dig through anything, just right there at the top. So looking at what we specifically have in our digital collection. So we started collecting in 2014. We are a little bit unique in that we do store these on our Wyoming State Library website. Not all states collect these, so we are a little bit unique in that manner. Currently, right now, we do have 1,330 documents in this federal document collection. Basically, what I'm collecting are any sort of federal agencies or departments with information that is specifically relevant to Wyoming. So if it doesn't have anything to Wyoming, then this is not going on into the online collection. So things that I'm collecting are things like reports, environmental assessments, mitigation plans, compendiums, anything of that sort. Right now, I collect from 10 different federal agencies. So the ones there on the screen are the ones that we have available as of current. Every month I do go in and collect materials from different federal agencies. So if I do find materials from a different federal agency that I do not already have, those will be added up monthly. So I do see document numbers kind of changing on a monthly basis. Right now, our largest agencies that have been collected from are the U.S. Forest Service with 469 documents, the Bureau of Land Management with 449 documents, and the National Park Service with 166 documents. As of right now, the Government Printing Office, which prints all federal documents, or the majority of them at least, has decided as of December 2023 to increase their digital items and decrease their physical items. So as of lately, printing has just taken a lot of resources, and so there should be more digital items that will be added to our collection. And I foresee that there will be way more of those added in lieu of physical items. But speaking of our physical collection, we do have a vast physical collection. And I figured I would show you some items that are available there that you can find. So these items in the physical collection are not necessarily all Wyoming related. Most of them are, but we also have items that are just from different agencies and items that are um, from like states adjacent to Wyoming, so things from like Colorado and Idaho, or things that may be sort of relevant to our user base. So what we're collecting in the physical collection begins with the Department of Agriculture. So we collect through the alphabet of federal agencies. So we start with the Department of Agriculture, and then we go all the way to congressional committees at the end. So looking on the screen here right now, over on the left side, just looking at kind of some interesting items that we have, and we collect lots of different formats. So things like maps, various pamphlets or serials, large booklets, anything of that sort. So over on the left, we have a few bulletins or farmers bulletins from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And these specific ones were created in the early 1900s. And during that time, the Department of Agriculture was creating a lot of bulletins that were to help people with various homesteading tasks and various activities that they may not have knowledge on. So this is anything from animal husbandry to creating apple butter to figuring out how to insulate your house better. So the specific ones that I have here are managing cranberry fields. I felt like that was very fall in nature, as well as packing apples in boxes. And so those are kind of interesting to look for or look at in a historical context. And they also have some fun pictures and kind of information that may now be a little bit outdated, but are kind of fun to look at. Next to the right of those, we have some U.S. Geological Survey or USGS surveys of territories. So these specifically are from the late 1800s, and they are detailing just various geographical areas that are kind of adjacent to us or close to us. So specifically in that picture there, we have a survey of Colorado, as well as surveys of territories in places like Montana, Idaho, and Utah. So these are very early reports of just various areas of land that the government was just trying to gain a little bit more information on. So we do have a large selection of very historic material that may not be the most relevant for most people to look at, but is certainly very interesting. Looking at a few more items that are a little bit more relevant potentially or a little bit more modern. Next to the USGS items, we have a couple maps there. So those maps are from the Bureau of Land Management, and those are mineral and surface management status topographic maps, specifically from Yellowstone, South Pass, Wyoming, and Basin, Wyoming. And so these maps specifically are looking at various mineral deposits and kind of the various land elevations in these specific areas. And then looking over on the very right side, we have some items from kind of congressional committees or congressional materials. So right there on the left of that picture, we have economic indicators by the Council of Economic Advisors from September of this year. So very relevant and very recent. So those we get very frequently, and so those are very up to date as of current. Next to that, we have a hearing booklet from regarding Montana water rights from 1979. So we have a lot of materials regarding various hearings that have gone on and the results of those. And then lastly, kind of a little book that I find interesting is a Congressional Pictorial Directory, and this is specifically from the 117th Congress. So these little books have pictures and very short biographies of people who are involved in that specific Congress. So those are kind of interesting to look at, as well as the fact that they are pocket-sized, so they are a little bit easier to kind of lug around. Then specifically just looking at some items that are more legislature kind of related. We have two very large sections of materials in our physical collection. So we have a large set of House and Senate documents, and those are the ones on the left there. And so those have a lot of actually kind of things related to what Vince was presenting on, but these are more so federal instead of state. And then on the right side, we have our collection of congressional records, and these range from 1791 to the present, or about 2016. Like I had mentioned, with the decrease in print or physical printing, we have not received physical versions of those, but those can be located on the Library of Congress website. These specific volumes, I have just cataloged in the past year with over 2,000 volumes added to our collection. So if you do look in our Wyoming State Library catalog, those can be found there now, which is great. It was a long and tedious task, but it feels really nice to finally have those available for the public and just available for people who do need those. And so lastly, just looking at how can you as a user access like our physical items or again, our digital items. So again, just at the top there, our online digital collection, as Vince had mentioned, is free and open to the public. You can look at that 24/7 whenever you would like. So definitely if you're looking for very specific Wyoming documents or Wyoming federal documents, you might find those on there in our online digital collection. So definitely check that out. You also can, if you're looking for more physical items or digital items as well, those can be checked out at our library. So if you are specifically a Wyoming state employee, you can have a library card here and check those out. But also, if you have a Wyoming Public Library card, you can also check out our materials. So anywhere in the state, if you're here, you can use that library card. And then lastly, you can also access our materials through interlibrary loans. So if you are out of state, you can go to your own personal library and you can receive those items or you can request those items and we can send them. But if you also are far away from Cheyenne, where we're located, you can also interlibrary loan just through your public library if you're in Wyoming or something like that. So definitely I encourage you, if you are looking for federal materials, reach out to us and we can potentially get those items to you. So I hope that by sharing all this, it kind of explains better where you can access our federal materials. And I hope that some of you can get some use out of them. And that's all for me. And I'll hand it back to Paige.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcie, and thank you, Vincent. That was really very informative. Are there any questions for either Vincent or Marcie? I know I have a question, Vincent, and you may have mentioned it, but what is that symbol that designates section? It's like the S on top of the S. What is
Yeah,
that
it's just
called?
it just means section. Yeah.
There's no name for that
I
symbol?
think it's just called section, yeah, and then you can have two together, which is just sections. So
Okay, okay. Well, thank you for answering that question. But yes, it was all very informative. Thank you for joining me today. I want to remind everybody that this has been recorded and the recording will be available on the Wyoming State Library YouTube channel, as well as a link will be sent out to everybody who registered for this webinar. And with that, if there are no questions, then I will go ahead and we'll close out this session. You can see our contact information there. Feel free to reach out. And again, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day.